Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy Podcast. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. The Road to Autonomy Podcast is brought to you in part by Florida Internet and Television. It's time to cut the tax on tech. Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's podcast, we're honored to have Chuck Price, Chief Product Officer, TuSimple, headquartered in San Diego, California, in the great United States of America. Welcome to the podcast, Chuck.
Thanks for having me.
We're super excited to have this wonderful conversation with you about the future of trucking, and especially as it relates to self-driving trucks.
I'm looking forward to the conversation.
From the U.S. Air Force Academy to self-driving trucks, could you please talk about that journey?
Oh, it started a long time ago, and I was in the Air Force when we still used punch cards. So it's quite a change, and I've gone from being in some, fairly substantial companies, Digital Equipment Corporation, Sun Microsystems, companies that don't even exist now, through 10 startups. This is my 10th startup and my second in automated trucks.
We're happy to have you here, and you've contributed a lot to the startup community. You've contributed a lot to the advancement of self-driving trucks, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Oh, well, thank you.
The autonomous vehicle industry seems to be at a crossroads today. As the dream of robotaxis is delayed, the industry is pivoting to self-driving trucks. Having had this being your second self-driving car startup and been through 10 startups, what are your thoughts?
It's an interesting time. The early developers of robotaxis were attracted, of course, by the fact that there are many cars, and everybody has a car. Everybody has at least one car. And so it seemed that that was the market to hit. What was missed in this was, what are the economics? For a self-driving car, this technology is effectively a luxury item. It's not a necessity. So the drivers, if you will, for this are around what makes my life easier as an individual driver. It's also hard to market to these individual drivers. And this is a mass market kind of program you'd have to do. On the other hand, trucks are a business-to-business play. Fleets buy thousands of trucks at a time. So it's a concentrated purchase, and the need is highly concentrated. It's very clear what the economic drivers are for applying autonomy to a truck. So when we started, that's what we considered to be the important aspect in what our focus would be.
Did you ever consider going into self-driving cars?
We actually never did consider that. We started with trucks. We think that there's a distinction between doing autonomy for a car and doing autonomy for a truck. Trucks are hard. They're large. They're highly mass. They're very massive vehicles. They're articulated. They bend in the middle. They're top heavy. If they are going to go unstable, they tend to go unstable and roll, not in yaw. So cars tend to skid out. Trucks tend to roll. So you have to think about all kinds of different elements when you're thinking about automating a truck.
When you were thinking about automating this, and let's say 95 at that point to 97% of the industry went to robotaxis, and self-driving trucks was kind of like this little outliner. Did you and the founding team at TuSimple see something in the economics and business case that the robotaxis guys didn't see? Because we're seeing a big pivot now. It seems like a big shift of the car guys are now coming over to the 3% trucking, and that field's just growing.
Yes, we did see a difference. We saw that there were specific economic pain points in trucking. Robotaxis were solving a problem that didn't appear to exist. It was a fantasy. It was science fiction. It was a future where cities didn't have to have individually owned cars, that parking issues would be resolved. This is grand vision without clear economic drivers. And the cost of doing this, even putting aside the cost of developing a virtual driver, which itself is massively expensive, the cost in restructuring cities to account for this is huge. Also, the fact that you have to map these cities, and cities can have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of roadways, makes it cost prohibitive just to deploy in a single city. But we saw a much better answer with trucks.
You bring up a very valid point around cities and fantasy. There was a research report that came out of Bernstein today that said 89% of miles driven over the last 10 years were either in rural or suburban areas, not metropolitan areas. It just seems that a lot of this was like, oh, we're going to reimagine a city, but it seemed like the bigger opportunity was in the rural and suburbia, and nobody's really focused there. And then when you're looking at long haul trucking, you're looking at going thousands of miles across the country, and you brought up the mapping point. Is it a fair assumption to say that it is much easier to map, say, the I-10 or the I-75 than it is to map a dense urban environment?
Oh, absolutely. Much, much easier. It doesn't change much. We don't have to deal with small lanes and cul-de-sacs and alleyways, which you do have to deal with in cities. So there are constraints on highways that play to our advantage, controlled access, segregated carriageways so that all the traffic's going the same direction, usually. And that makes it for a much more straightforward kind of environment to deal with.
So you have a straightforward environment, and then let's say I'm Acme. I'm developing the self-driving car for dense urban environments, and there's been a phrase that's been thrown around the industry called the universal driver. Well, I can take the driver that I met for urban, the driver I met for suburban, and put it on the highway. To me, it doesn't seem like that's worked, and you've made some pretty great public statements around the universal driver as it relates pivoting to trucking. Could you please talk about that?
Sure. I don't believe there is such a thing as a universal driver. It's a marketing term, in my opinion, intended to cover up the fact that you're actually pivoting your business to a different technology. For every driving environment, which we refer to as the operational design domain, that's basically a set of requirements on what the virtual driver needs to do. And the operational design domain, or the ODD, for cities is a very different thing than for highways or ports or mines. And the physical system changes. In an urban area, it's not that important to be able to see long range because the vehicles are going slow. They might not be able to see very far anyway because they're blocked by traffic and buildings and signage. But that's okay because the vehicles aren't going fast. They're going 25, 35 miles an hour. On the highway, these are massive vehicles going at great speed. Our system operates at up to 75 to 80 miles an hour. At those speeds, you need a different sensor suite. And you can't count on LiDAR as your primary because it doesn't have the range. Even the advanced LiDAR that's coming out struggles to see even the minimum distances required for us to operate safely at 75 miles an hour. So we rely on a different kind of system. We rely on a system that's camera-based, that gives us very long-range perception. And that long-range perception changes everything else. Our prediction systems, our planning systems are all better, more sophisticated because we have the long-range perception. And so when you go from a city-based driver to a highway, high-speed driver, everything in that software is affected and changes in substantial ways. We have seen our competitors try to put city drivers onto trucks, and they fail. They're not working. And many of our competitors who are in trucks are starting from a car software stack base, a car-based virtual driver. We started from scratch. We did not borrow anything. We did not use any open source solutions. We started from scratch, building a truck-based virtual driver.
So, couple follow-ups. What is the minimum distance for perception for your trucks to drive?
Well, our perception system sees with a high degree of reliability out to 1,000 meters, a kilometer, over a half mile ahead, about 0.6 of a mile. That gives us enough distance, enough forward planning that at very high speed, not only are we safe, but we're efficient because we can do deep lane by lane analysis to understand which lane we should be in to keep the mass moving at a constant speed as much as possible. That saves fuel. But it also assures that in the critical ranges, which we believe the critical range at high speed is in the 500-meter range, anywhere from a quarter mile out, is the critical range for safety for a large truck. Our sensors are highly reliable in that range. The competitive approach is using LiDAR as a primary sensor. That's at the extremes of those sensors. So they're reaching the point where they have limited reliability, where they're missing more targets than they're finding. So our system operates at very high confidence, at high speed, in the ranges that are required for safety.
Picking up on the key theme of safety here, that you're going above and beyond to ensure that the roads are safe for me as a passenger, it's safe for your safety drivers, and for the residents of the communities where you operate. Could you talk about TuSimple's culture of safety? Because you had that brilliant 60 Minutes piece, what's really highlighted it. But can you kind of go into, remove the 60 Minutes stuff and kind of go deeper into your culture of safety, please?
Sure. Well, we have a corporate culture. We have a defined corporate culture. And the first element of that is what we call safeguard. And it applies to every employee in the company, whether they're operating, vehicles or fixing vehicles or writing software or performing administrative functions. Everyone is measured on their contribution to safety. And this is something we do formally every quarter. A portion of your performance is on what did you do to contribute to safety, and we enforce that as a management team. And we find that putting that forward drills it into every aspect of what we do. So you see it in our office environment, you see it in our operational environment, you see it in the trucks. We also put very high expectations on our what we call the safety team in the vehicle, the left seaters and the right seaters. We have very high standards that they must conform to. They go through formal training. In fact, we've made this formal training available to community colleges so others can use it as well. A typical driver typically goes through about 6 months of training internally before they're allowed really to touch the autonomy. Similarly with the right seaters, who are the technical parts of the team. We have extreme standards of performance for these teams. If a driver makes even the smallest of mistake, they go through a formal drug test, they have to write a report, they are required to develop witnesses, and they go through a review before they're allowed to get back in the vehicle. And these can be tiny little infractions that we watch for. And what that does is it creates a pride in the teams that is infectious. So we're extremely thrilled with this kind of program. Most safe fleets treat their drivers like airline pilots. They go through regular training, they're monitored. We treat our drivers like the Blue Angels. So they have to operate with a very fine degree of precision, and they hold themselves to that standard. So there's a real pride in the organization around that.
You hold them to the same level of the Blue Angels. Is there in-cabin monitoring, or how are you monitoring all those different things when they're out on the road on the long haul, say going from Phoenix to Dallas, for example? How are you monitoring that to ensure that that culture of safety is, when you're not looking, that it's still continuing?
Yeah, great question. And we do have multiple modes of monitoring. We do have cameras on the driver and on the safety engineer in the right seat. We also have a specific device independent of our own autonomy that is monitoring for hard braking events, for speeding, for these kinds of events. We have drive cams that are independent of our system that are doing sort of the standard drive cam monitoring. And we also look at our data, the data that we're logging. Anytime there is a deviation, we're having conversations with the drivers. So we have a safety officer that is monitoring sort of standard fleet safety reports, the hard braking, the rapid accelerations, harsh steering, lane changing abruptly, speeding. When the drivers are driving manually, we look for those things. When the system's in autonomy, the autonomy is behaving. That's what it's programmed to do. But when the drivers are driving manually, that's when we're really watching. We also look at how the drivers perform when the system is in autonomy. So we look at every single disengagement of the system. We have regular meetings on a weekly basis looking at all disengagements and having conversations with the entire driver team on why this happened, what they expected, and what the system actually delivered. It allows us to evolve the system into behaving more like a professional driver every day.
Is that one of the big driving factors, the incredible development you're doing on the autonomy plus the safety culture? So when you're building up the AFN network with the Autonomous Freight Network and you sign a new partner, are those two the big driving factors? They see your culture of safety, that TuSimple takes this very, very safe and they're respecting our brand, and that they say, okay, if we partner with TuSimple, we know that this is a culture of safety. We're not putting our brand in a situation what could jeopardize our brand value?
Absolutely. Safety is a huge part of the relationship we have with our partners. We report on our performance, we report on any events that might happen, and it also shows in our on time performance. So when we operate safely, we have fewer surprises. We're very careful before we launch. We do deep inspections of the vehicle. We're very careful about the care of the vehicle. And this reduces practical issues like downtime on the road, breakdowns on the road. We don't have those things. We know in detail what's happening with our systems. We know in detail what's happening with our drivers and our right seaters. So one of the things that we're also proud of is that the safety approach also contributes to our on-time performance. And we have a 100% record so far with that.
That's incredible. So to our listeners who might not be familiar with autonomous trucking, you mentioned deep inspections. Is that similar to when you're going on a commercial airline and you see the pilot go down and look at the wings and look at everything? Is that what your safety drivers and the right seaters and left seaters are going and giving it an overview with their own two eyes? Say, okay, this looks right. This is not right. Hey, might have to go in for maintenance. Is that a fair way to quantify and compare?
It is a great comparison. There are a lot of similarities. All truck drivers are required to do a pre-trip inspection. There are certain things that they have to check by regulation, but we go much farther than that. They have to check the vehicle system, of course, the vehicle itself, but they also have to check the autonomy. And the autonomy is doing a very close check on performance behaviors that may go missed by a human driver. Tire pressures, air pressures, oil pressures and temperatures. All of these things are being monitored constantly. The performance of the engine relative to what we're asking the engine to do, the performance of the brakes relative to what we're asking the system to do. These are all things that we are able to see as the vehicle's rolling, and we can sound alerts if anything is drifting. So it's a combination of very careful observation by both the left seater and the right seater. And I should say we always run with two people in the vehicle because we're not only monitoring the vehicle system, they're monitoring each other. So, and partly they're doing that by constantly talking. We have a protocol that requires that.
Is the vehicle system being monitored in real time?
It is. It is. It's being monitored by the team in the vehicle and off the vehicle.
So when you're going to launch a truck from a depot, and let's just say you have Mrs. Jane in the left seat and you have Mr. Robert in the right seat, and they're getting ready to launch and it's all filled up with the cargo, could you walk us through how that whole process works until they ship off and head on to carry the cargo to the destination?
Absolutely. It looks a lot like, in some ways, it looks like air traffic control, like an airline. There is a deep inspection. The vehicle is confirmed to be ready to go. All of the elements are in place. The tires are in good shape. The fuel is filled. The batteries are topped up. The automated system is ready to roll. There is a formal indication that the driver has to make a declaration to the oversight system that's monitoring all this to say, this has been inspected and I'm certifying that it's ready to go on the road. At that point, the oversight system enables the vehicle for autonomy. And then the fleet can do a dispatch. They can press the button in their management systems that says, launch this vehicle, at which point the vehicle will roll.
Wow. Okay, this is getting really impressive. So you've got the safety figured out. You've got the culture of safety, And now we're going to go into everybody in startup world's favorite term is scale.
Yeah.
So you have the AFN, and we mentioned the Autonomous Freight Network. Let's go kind of start with basics. Could you explain to our listeners what the AFN is, and then we'll go from there?
At the largest level, the AFN represents the business model with which autonomy will be used. It's the place where fleets can access autonomy. And it is essentially mapped routes, capacity in the form of vehicles, either put on by fleets. It is terminals where the vehicles can start and stop, and that can be either private terminals, which, for example, UPS has many terminals today. We map directly to their terminals. That becomes a private terminal for them. We're also creating shared terminals where lower capacity fleets, lower utilization customers can access the autonomous environment. And it includes oversight, a system that constantly monitors where the vehicles are, whether they need service, whether they're in trouble, they got a flat tire and had to pull over. We take care of all of that, and we do that ourselves and with our partners. So we have a number of partners who are providing capacity, who are providing serviceability, who are providing refueling support. All of this is part of the autonomous freight network.
With the shared terminals, is the what did you do to contribute to safety, that statement and that culture, does that carry over to those shared terminals as well?
Absolutely. The shared terminals have designed in inspection facilities, designed in maintenance facilities. It creates a launch pad for the autonomy. So even when there are no drivers involved, there will be operators at the terminals who inspect and certify the vehicles for readiness. If they aren't ready, they're pulled back to a maintenance facility and made ready.
In August, TuSimple announced a partnership with Navistar to co-develop a Level 4 self-driving truck. Why is this so important to both parties? And then will these trucks be available on the AFN in the future?
Oh, well, they absolutely will be available. And it's important to move. So it's easy for a self-driving technology developer to establish a development relationship with an OEM. That basically is a simple relationship that the OEM says, yes, we'll provide you vehicles. We're not liable. Anything you do is your responsibility, but we'll answer questions that you might have about, how the vehicle works. A production relationship is an entirely different animal. In a production relationship, the OEM is saying, we're going to produce a product that contains your technology. We're the only ones to date that have established a production relationship with an OEM. And that means this is the next step to get vehicles actually on the road, fully homologated, safety certified by the OEM, and supported after the sale by the OEM through the OEM's nationwide support network. So this is very different from, doing research on a vehicle, building a few vehicles, putting them on the road. That doesn't scale. An OEM-based production agreement scales to tens, hundreds of thousands of vehicles.
Navistar trucks with TuSimple technology will be coming straight out, delivered from the factory, built to automotive grade without any, you see some of the other stuff where they get a wrench and they connect everything. This is full automotive grade out of the factory?
Absolutely. Yeah. Automotive grade parts, a full design in solution, so it's not bolted on after the fact. This is not a platform on which we will retrofit the solution. This is a fully integrated, fared in, beautiful vehicle.
When the announcement came out, I took a look at the Navistar stock and I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. And I wanted to see, did Wall Street just digest this and did the stock move on the news? But the stock closed up 3.1% on the New York Stock Exchange with the news. To me, this is a clear indicator that Wall Street's happy with this strategy. Any thoughts?
Well, I think Wall Street should be happy. Navistar has the opportunity to substantially increase its market share with this kind of technology. This is a very high demand technology. And when we make this work, I think we're going to see Navistar move up in the hierarchy of OEMs to be the dominant player in the space. They're going to be first, and I happen to think they're going to be the best.
When we think of dominant players and we look at Wall Street, and everybody at some point in a conversation about investments is going to talk about the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett himself. So I'm a Wall Street guy. I like to read a lot of random stuff. So I start doing some research. Okay, Berkshire's a really interesting company. The B shares are trading below book value and working in and around autonomy. I start looking. So I find out Berkshire Hathaway has quite the investment portfolio in trucking, with ownership stakes of McLean, who's an AFN partner, Marmoom, Highway Technologies, and Pilot Travel Centers. Then I start going back into historical statements that Warren Buffett has made around trucking and logistics. And in 2007, during the acquisition of Pilot Travel Centers and the Flying J, Warren Buffett himself is quoted as saying, "The company has a smart growth strategy in place, and we look forward to a partnership that supports the trucking industry for years to come. The investment's now closed. Berkshire now fully owns Pilot. Is the next move an investment in self-driving trucks? Because Wall Street's clearly liking what you're doing."
Well, I won't speak for the Oracle himself. He invests where he invests. I do think it would be a smart investment. This is a tremendous opportunity. It's going to be highly disruptive in a very positive way, in a way that is rarely seen in any industry. There have been a few key points over the years in transportation, and this, I think, is going to be the next one. It's one that I think your grandkids will look back on and say, yeah, he was there at the beginning.
You're right on that. And think about this. It complements the BNSF railway business, because then you can start hauling freight where there's no railways, and you have general reinsurance too. You can do a reinsurance. You have the Geico insurance. You have a large insurance float. So, and then you also have Nebraska Furniture Mart. So you have large goods. You have the ability to haul stuff where there's no longer a railway. It seems like it's all coming together here. Am I kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit here?
Well, it does more tightly integrate the transportation market. Railroads do have constraints on their ability to expand. They are an important part of the transportation space, but this gives railroads an ability to expand in ways that look like a virtual rail system. They can quickly get to, truck transportation when it's unconstrained by hours of service rules looks a lot like rail transportation. And this gives railways an ability to expand in ways that they've never had possible before. So it is an opportunity for rail. It also affects air transportation, because the way we move things with an automated vehicle is more efficient than with human driven vehicles, because we never have to stop. So we can displace some air transportation that's happening now and move it to trucks, which makes it much cleaner, much cheaper, and still delivers on the expected delivery performance.
What you're building with the AFN then is probably the world's most advanced logistics network for moving goods from one location to another?
Yes, I think so. I think this change will look a lot like what happened when aircraft were integrated into the truck transportation system. And aircraft and hub systems were invented for increasing the speed of transportation. We think this is an even more comprehensive change. So we're quite excited about it.
We talked about your relationship with Berkshire Hathaway's McLean, but you also have a public relationship with UPS. I think this is totally cooler than cool. You're hauling mail for the United States Postal Service, and you have a really, I would call it, efficient, super smart relationship with the team over at Penske Truck Leasing. Could you talk about what each one of those partners brings to the AFN and to the advantages of them using the AFN?
Absolutely. In the case of UPS, we're learning from UPS about operating very large fleets and what their most critical pain points are, and how this kind of system can advance fleets like UPS themselves, and fleets like them. Same thing with the United States Postal Service. With USPS, we're learning especially about very long haul operations and about the need to move critical goods. So these are all important facets of what we're doing. With Penske, we have a diverse set of needs that they're addressing. They not only provide capacity, because they are In fact, I believe they're probably Navistar's largest customer. They are a huge truck fleet by themselves. They provide capacity to others, but they also provide service capability. So when a truck breaks down, a Penske truck rolls and hauls it to a facility for service. So that is something that we're partnering with them on as well. So when we talk about a nationwide rollout of the AFN, it's not just mapping the nation's highways, which we're also getting help from our fleet partners to do, which allows us to do it very quickly at scale. But we're also partnering with partners like Penske to provide the service capability that's required to make this work. And we'll partner with others for things like refueling. So this is all part of the AFN infrastructure and partnership to make it work.
What's next for the AFN?
Scale. So we're building it out in 3 phases. We've just completed our scaling up to include Texas. We started in Arizona. We've expanded to Texas and the Golden Triangle in Texas, the Texas Triangle, which is some of the most dense freight movement in the country. And then we're expanding beyond that along I-10 all the way out to Florida and up to the Carolinas. So that will be phase 2, that extension beyond Texas. And then phase 3 is to take on the most northern regions of the country. So we're doing this in phases. We're learning as we go, bringing partners along as we go, and building our customer base.
If I'm a shipper, not one of the large household name shippers, but I ship a decent amount of goods around the United States, why would I want to ship my goods over the AFN instead of hiring a traditional fleet or building it in-house? Is there an economic savings?
Absolutely. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it's more reliable to go over the AFN. Autonomy is a safer way to move goods. It's a cleaner way to move goods. It's a cheaper way to move goods. For sort of a low volume shipper, there are a number of ways to connect to the AFN. We have 3PL partners who will be connecting the shipper to the network so that the goods are carried by the right carrier for that shipper, with the departure and destination points in TuSimple shared terminals.
Is the AFN currently hauling cargo, or is TuSimple currently hauling cargo, or is it just purely testing at this point?
Oh, we're actually hauling cargo. So we're building out the network and actually signing shipper customers. We have 22 today. We're moving cargo every day for them. And what this does is it helps people today understand how to use the next generation network in a way that allows them to integrate now to be prepared for the time when we are a complete autonomous driver out of the vehicle system.
And you're not operating this for a charity. I'm assuming this has got to be a safe assumption based on the Wall Street news that you're charging for this cargo and you're generating revenue?
We're charging competitive rates today. We are generating revenue today, and we have plans to continue to grow that. And I think one of the markers of our progress will be the revenue that we're generating on the AFN.
So there's been rumors around revenue's been leaked that you've been generating. Is that why we're seeing the Robotaxi company say, wait a second, TuSimple's making a lot of money here. We haven't made $1 in revenue. Is that, do you think, kind of what's driving a little bit of this?
It could be. And it also is likely that on the Robotaxi side, they're having a hard time really building the business case. It's very expensive to build out a service for a city that is as comprehensive as human-driven services. So the cost of scaling that up and making that really reliable, it's not justified by the revenue, by the return. These vehicles are expensive to build and expensive to buy. And the price that the market will bear for robotaxis doesn't justify the cost in building this out. That's not the same with trucks. The market will bear a good price for this. It will be cheaper than the operations today. And we're able to build these vehicles in a way that we can show an ROI on an investment in trucking within the first 24 months of purchase, which is very important for trucking.
It's extremely important, but then on the flip side, it seems to me that if you take an individual, go to the grocery store, your Bounty or your Clorox wipes or your water could be cheaper because the cost to move that good will be there cheaper. So it seems to me that it's a complete win-win for both sides of the equation.
It's absolutely a win-win. Shipping becomes cheaper. It becomes more reliable, which also goes to cost. There's less shrinkage because more of the goods are actually making it to the destination, and it's safer. So insurance costs, the secondary costs of this go down. Maintenance costs go down. Fuel costs goes down. Everything is cheaper when you do it in this way.
When we're going to fast forward to the future as we get ready to wrap up this conversation, I'm going down the highway. I'm just taking my family. We're going to go play a soccer game, or we're going to go have an outing, and we're on the highway. Will I know if your truck is an autonomous truck? Will the cabin be different? Will I be able to tell, or I'll just say, oh, that's just another truck, and just keep going on my merry way?
Well, hopefully you won't notice based on its behavior. What you will notice is it's a very well-behaved truck. Otherwise, you shouldn't notice that that's autonomous. It's a truck that's driving as the best drivers drive. You should be happy to be near it. As happy as you can be being near a very large truck. They are kind of scary beasts. But this is a very well-behaved one. Will it look different? Maybe. We have the ability to rethink how the cab is designed when it is occupied less by humans. So you may see some changes. They may look more streamlined. They may be narrower. There are changes that may happen that allow you to say as you go by, oh, that must be autonomous. Look how streamlined it is. But otherwise, we hope you won't notice. We hope it'll just be a very polite vehicle that you're operating around.
I like polite vehicles. I think a majority of individuals driving around the roads of the United States would like polite vehicles. So Today you have a safety driver in the left seat, a safety engineer in the right seat. As we fast forward into the future, eventually, you've publicly said you will go driver out. What are TuSimple's plans to go driver out? And will I notice any difference, or will this truck still be the nice, polite truck?
Yes, it will be the nice, polite truck. We do have plans for an initial demonstration of our driver out capability in actually next year, probably around this time next year, a little later, perhaps. So that's our first public demonstration, and that will be a real vehicle system on a real route with a real shipper moving real cargo from a departure point to a destination. It will be going through surface streets and highways, demonstrating the ability to do this without a human in the vehicle at all. The first practical use driver out will be in 2024 when we ship the vehicles from Navistar. Those will all be driver out capable. And that will be done, within the constraints of the regulatory climate, which we think will be favorable for that.
That's a very fair statement and a great way to wrap this up, because the regulatory environment here in the United States under the leadership of Secretary Chow, and we have a very innovative president in Donald Trump, which is allowing the industry to allow us to constantly innovate, create innovations in America, and to allow this technology to prosper here in America. And as we look to wrap this up, Chuck, I love for you to leave it with this. What would you like our listeners to know about the future of self-driving trucks in TuSimple?
Sure. Simply, it's a reality. It's coming. This is no longer research. This is something that we're actually completing. It will improve safety. It will contribute to a stronger economy. It provides more reliable, more efficient, faster delivery, and it's cleaner. It's more environmentally friendly than what we're doing today.
The future's bright. The future's autonomous. And TuSimple is building the future of freight logistics. And Chuck, thanks again. And for our listeners who want to learn more about TuSimple, where can they go to learn more about the company?
Go to our website, TuSimple.ai.
And if somebody wants to join the AFN network, where do they go?
TuSimple.ai. There's a place to click to become a part of it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Chuck. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation.
Thank you for providing me the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.